What's going on, everybody? Teach back again with another video, and today talking about my updated 2023 NFL rankings as we get closer and closer to the 2023 NFL Draft. Already done this once on the channel, and actually a little bit of a change from this one versus the last one. I have 15 names to talk about today, so I'm going to be a little bit quicker running through these because I don't want the video to get too lengthy, but not a whole lot has changed within the top 5, so let's go ahead and kick things off. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Hit the like button if you do. If you're new around here, want to see more draft content, more football content, just hit that big red subscribe button and comment your rankings. You know, the NFL draft and position rankings, big board, all that stuff is super subjective, so let me hear your 1 through 5 and some honorable mentions maybe down below in the comment section. But kicking things off, still a big Sean Tucker believer. A little bit of a disappointing this season this past year at Syracuse, but he's just one of those size, speed freaks and also size, speed, strength type of freaks that you don't really get a whole lot of, specifically at this position. So I think he's worth taking the shot on. And then, you know, once you get to the NFL level and some NFL coaching, maybe getting away from Syracuse will do him some well. But I think a guy who can easily run in the 4.3s and will put up some god numbers in the bench press if you care about that. But again, speed and strength in his profile and plenty to spare. Then we get to Tank Bigsby, again, another guy who, you know, a little disappointing. And I remember him as a true freshman. I was like, this dude is about to become the next first round running back. And even though I'm not crazy about running backs in the first round, I was like, Tank Bigsby about to make it a necessary move. But unfortunately, kind of tapered off, had some fumble issues in his career as well. And unfortunately, you know, with the Brian, Hardsley, situation at Auburn, it's like, there was so much around him, and there's so much drama around the program in and of itself. And then even once they moved on and made, the interim coach switch midway through the season, kind of felt like Tank Bigsby's having to put the team on his back. And I actually compare his situation to what Jahmyr Gibbs, my number 2 running back here, had to do at Georgia Tech, where it's like, it felt like you could see this guy trying to win the game on every handoff, and every carry he got, he was like, I have to take this to the house. And that was something I thought once Gibbs left Georgia Tech, went to Alabama, had to play within an offense, he would be a lot better, which we're going to talk about Gibbs in a little bit. But I could see Bigsby getting to the NFL level, getting a better situation around him. And it's like, yeah, dude, we don't need you to break off every run for 80 yards. Just do your job. Read the hole, get us 5-6 yards. If it's more, great. If not, if we get 5 yards, we'll pick up a first down in 2 plays. Just simplify what he's asked to do, and I think he could become a really, really good player. Also, I think a little bit of a differentiation between Tucker and Bigsby. Both, again, big, strong, and fast players, but Bigsby, I think, has a little bit more of that one-cut ability. So love to see him get into a zone blocking scheme where it's just like, hey, read the blocks, find the hole, one cut, go get there, and take off. Love to see him in that type of an offense. Then Zach Charbonnet comes in at number 3, but quick point, if Blake Corum did decide to declare for the draft he's going to go back to Michigan, had that really scary injury and potentially draft stock altering injury, so I understand why he made the move to go back, but even with the injury, had he declared, he would have been my running back 3. But excited to talk about him in the 2024 draft class, I guess. Zach Charbonnet, a different build than specifically in the build, 6'2", 225 plus pounds versus, Corum is right around 200 pounds, but at 5'8", right? Like, kind of has that Maurice Jones-Drew kind of build. Charbonnet is, I'm not saying he's Derrick Henry, but much more in that build. He's actually a little shorter, a little smaller too, but kind of in that same mold where just looks like a bruising, imposing type of back. Has some decent long speed. I think he'll run in the mid 4.5, so he's not necessarily slow despite being that big. And I think a little bit more this year at UCLA, I saw a little bit more quickness, a little bit more twitchy ability to kind of at least make one cut. Now, I don't think he's a guy who, Shady McCoy could go back and forth and bounce back and forth in the juke. And then it just felt like there was never any lost speed in every move he could break out. Charbonnet, once he plants that foot, makes that initial cut, that's about all you're going to get out of him. But that being said, because he is 6'2" and he plays with so much strength, once he plants that back foot and drives forward, good luck, bringing him down for something other than, at least him falling forward for a yard or two, right? Like, because of that, he's not going to break off 50-yard runs, but I can really trust Zach Charbonnet to be, the complement a pass-heavy offense maybe needs just, 4 to 6 yards a pop. That's all I need out of you, Charbonnet. So this could be a guy, depending on, definitely don't see him in that first-round conversation. Really, that's kind of 1 and 2, specifically the number 1 guy who I think goes round 1. But, if he gets, drafted by a contender in a pass-heavy team, the one that immediately comes to mind is, like, Cincinnati or Buffalo. I'm, looking forward to the divisional game. I'm recording this just before that, but one of those two teams. Now I get it; they have other running back options. But let's just say in a world where they needed a running back, those two teams passing, they might just need that little bit of change of pace, somebody to kind of give Burrow or Allen a mental break, reset, hand it off, and get 5 yards. Okay, we're still on track here. Charbonnet, I think, in a contender, pass-happy offense would be a really interesting addition to an offense. Then we get Jahmyr Gibbs here too. And, honestly, it's really interesting actually talk about the Bills. Jahmyr Gibbs feels so much like James Cook, where they're both like 80% of Dalvin Cook. Not quite as fast, not quite as quick, not quite as twitchy, not quite as elusive, but both those guys also, despite that, a little bit better pass catchers than Dalvin Cook was coming out of Florida State when Dalvin Cook entered the NFL draft. So a little bit of give and take there. But dude, you've seen how James Cook has kind of picked it up down the stretch of the regular season into the playoffs. He's become the guy at the top of that committee. I think Jahmyr Gibbs could easily do something like that. Plays with good speed, does have good shiftiness, good elusiveness, but also a really good pass catcher. So, maybe a team like a Philadelphia in the second round, Miami the second round, I think makes a ton of sense there. Kind of gives you that speed, elusiveness profile while also being a solid pass catcher. So definitely feel a starting position, or, not necessarily going to be a guy in a running back, position for a team where they're the workhorse. That's kind of an outdated role. But Jahmyr Gibbs, even as a rookie, I think could be a top of the committee type of guy for an NFL team, and for a good one at that. And then we get Bijan Robinson, number 1. No surprise here. I mean, the best pure runner in this class, can run in between the tackles, can run outside, has speed, power, elusiveness, you name it, he's got it. Fantastic pass catcher, can line up in the slot legitimately. I think 30 to 40% of his snaps to the NFL level. Can also split out wide. Texas had him do that. Now, most of the time, when he would go out wide, he was just kind of taking a step back off the line and catching a screen. But hey, you get him into a creative offense, like, hey, let's just say the Lions took him at 18, and Ben Johnson is coming back as the OC, got Bijan Robinson in his hands. I'd love to see what that creative of mind could do with such a unique offensive talent. Yeah, he's a running back, but he really is an offensive weapon. That sounds so dumb, but it really is true, just because he is a Christian McCaffrey type of pass catcher in a lot of ways. And Chris McCaffrey went top 10, and Saquon Barkley goes number 2 overall, and Saquon kind of had a little bit of that. I think Bijan's an even better pass catcher than Saquon was coming out of Penn State. Adrian Peterson, top 10 pick when he came out, and to me, Bijan's the best running back prospect since Adrian Peterson. The game has changed a ton since 2007, right? Like 16 years worth of NFL time does a whole lot to change the complexion of the league. But nonetheless, I think he's the best running back prospect since Adrian Peterson, and when you factor in his receiving ability, that wasn't something Adrian Peterson had. He is what Adrian Peterson was in 07, but for what the league looks like nowadays. Hopefully that makes sense. But that is my running backs, 5 up through 1. Kind of thinking about this in retrospect, maybe I should have done 6 through 10 and then 5 up to 1. But nonetheless, here's my 6 through 10. We'll go ahead and go 10 up to 6, just like I did 5 through 1. So a little bit clunky of organization, so I do apologize for that. But Roschon Johnson, sticking in the Tennessee backfield, bit of a higher cut than Bijan Robinson, where he was 5'10", 5'11". Johnson 6'1", 6'1 and a half, maybe 6'2". And obviously playing behind Bijan, didn't get to see a whole lot of him, but the little bit of a sample you see there, it's impressive. A guy with big frame, has a ton of speed. Has that one-cut ability. Doesn't play with the power of a Zach Charbonnet, despite being a similar, height and weight, but has more quickness off of that. And also 85 missed tackles and 189 carries this year. I don't know if that type of forced missed tackle rate is necessarily translatable to the NFL level. Like, once you give him a bigger sample size, that percentage is probably going to regress to the mean. But damn, I'm interested to see if it does. Maybe not. I mean, maybe he was just bogged down behind the best running back in the country, and because of that, he was kind of this hidden gem in the rough, or diamond in the rough, and he's a damn good player too. So I'm buying into what might be there in Johnson, and because, again, didn't get to see a lot of him in college, and this is a deep running back class, there are going to be teams who want to wait, so Johnson may well become one of the best day 3 selections. I could totally see a world where that happens. Zach Evans comes at number 9, 5-star recruit. He actually became the first 5-star that TCU had ever nabbed. His recruiting, story is really interesting because it kind of took a long process, kind of committed, decommitted a couple times, and that's how he ended up at TCU. Then transfers to Ole Miss this year. I was really hoping we'd see more out of him, but honestly, the guy at number 7, Kendre Miller out of TCU, who replaced Evans, showed me more. But I am still believing in the potential that was there because Evans has the athletic profile, kind of that perfect size, right around 5'10", 200 pounds. So I do think there is still a lot to be tapped into, and maybe it just takes some NFL coaching and some NFL perspective on how to use his skill set. But I think speed's there, I think quickness is there, has the elusiveness, a decent enough pass catcher during his time at TCU and Ole Miss. So I never really got to see the full potential of what he was kind of coming out of high school. But I do think at the NFL level, it's just a different world, and coaches are better at tapping into that talent. So do think there is still something to be worked on there. Keaton Mitchell, that's probably one of the slipperiest guys in this draft class. If you watch the ECU Coastal Carolina Bowl game, you saw Keaton Mitchell at his, I don't want to say at his best, but that was a game where I would point to somebody who's never seen him play before, and I'd say watch him there, because he was awesome in that bowl game, especially earlier on. But yeah, ton of quickness, awesome burst, could run the 4.3s, hits the hole, and does not waste a step getting there. No wasted motion in its running style either. But again, vision's the biggest thing. So you'll hear me kind of say this. You're probably already getting tired of me saying it, but guy who can hit the hole and hit it quick. That's what we're looking for here. But then has that long speed. A lot of the guys I focus on, like a Charbonnet, and even like a Kendre Miller, who we're going to talk about here in a little bit, and one of the guys in the honorable mentions. I'm more so looking for a running back who, like, change of pace, can pick up 5 to 15 yards. 5 yards so we can stay on track and kind of give my quarterback a little bit of a mental break. But hey, if you get 15 yards, sweet, first down, and we can go from there. So I'm not necessarily hunting for guys who are going to break it off for 80 yards, but if you are, Keaton Mitchell is definitely one of the top guys on your list for this year's draft class. Kendre Miller, not going to wow you athletically, so kind of a contrast there from Keaton Mitchell, but a guy who just consistent, keeps the leg churning, almost 4 yards a carry this year at TCU, almost 4 yards a carry after contact, I should say, at TCU. Just a solid mold of consistency, solid NFL frame. I don't think he'll wow you when it comes to the 40. Again, I don't think there's a huge amount of potential when it comes to his athletic profile, but a smart runner, a guy who can, again, has good vision, hits the hole and hits it quick, and also a solid enough pass catcher. So depending on what you're looking for, you can move Miller and Mitchell, maybe swamp spots there. But Miller ultimately was kind of the efficient runner that Zach Evans never was. So I do want to give him credit there, and that's why I have him ranked higher. And then Devin Achane here at 6, a guy who legitimately runs on the indoor and outdoor track and field team at Texas A&M. I think if you were to ask me who's going to run the fastest 40 time, I would tell you Devin Achane, just because it makes the most sense to me. But this dude's blazing quick. And, it's interesting. I've kind of pondered about this and maybe thought about trying to find some data and do some research into this, but when you see fast 40 times, it feels like those smaller guys, like a Devin Achane who's like sub 5'10", it feels like once you put the pads on them, they kind of lose that step a little bit, versus like a Denzel Perriman or a Brashad Perriman, not Denzel Perriman, Brashad Perriman, or some of these big wide receivers who run these 4.2, 4.3s. Josh Gordon, another good example. It's like you put the pads on them, and maybe it's just because they're bigger and they already weigh more. Those guys don't feel like they lose a step. That 40 time is exact with what they actually play at. Devin Achane is the exception to that. That dude, once you put the pads on, doesn't miss a stride. This guy flies. In a lot of ways, he was the best thing Texas A&M had going for their offense. Every time Haynes King was tasked with throwing, I had to close my eyes. It was too putrid to watch, so I apologize to any Aggies fans out there. But Devin Achane was a stud. He is boom or bust, because if he doesn't get into an offense with a good offensive line in front of him that allows him to hit the hole and take advantage of his speed, I don't know if he does a whole lot to create for himself, but man, because of the speed, and you can't teach that, and he is shaky once he's in the open field. If you get him into, a zone blocking scheme, or, I wish in a perfect world, like Miami could get his hands on him. I'd love to see what Mike McDaniels could draw up for him, or Kyle Shanahan. If he continues to draft running backs way too early, maybe he takes a flyer on Achane in the third, and if so, that's the match made in heaven. I want to see Achane in offense-wise, but also that's the offense I think that creates the most out of Achane's skill set. So that's my 6 through 10. Let's go ahead and start talking about these honorable mentions now. We'll kick things off with talking about a national champion, Kenny McIntosh. This is a guy where if I just got to see more of him at Georgia, he'd probably be higher on this list, but right now he's just kind of that running back 11. Good burst, good elusiveness, good speed, good pass catching ability. Does a lot of things right. I just didn't get to see a whole lot of them this year at Georgia, because they have a deep rotation of backs. They've always had a lot of talent there in the backfield. So this could be a guy who, even teams who like him, probably not taking him before, mid to late round 3. So I think you're going to get a solid value on him, and he could totally be a guy that gets to an NFL level, carves out a bigger role for him within a committee as that number 2 guy right away, and all of a sudden shows a ton of it, and then maybe it could become, in a year's time, that number 1 guy at the top of a committee. I wouldn't be shocked by any means if that happens for McIntosh. Then we get Chris Rodriguez. I've said this 1,000 times that Will Levis, to me, only had one other guy on that offense that I think could play on Sundays, and that's Chris Rodriguez. 5'11", right around 200 pounds, kind of has that ideal build, maybe a little bit, Blake Corum 5'8", 200 is kind of perfect, so maybe Rodriguez a little tall, but, 5'11", 200, I'm not nitpicking there. Not insane long speed. Again, not a crazy athlete, but again, if we're talking about getting 5 to 15 yards, this guy can hit that sweet spot consistently. Good vision, plays with good power as well, and he was leaned on pretty heavily to be a workhorse at Kentucky, which, again, with Will Levis, it's like, hey, this guy's going to go to the top 5. Maybe we should lean into that. But, hey, Mark Stoops, defensive coach, comes from that type of background, whether you want to win on the ground and win with their defense. So Rodriguez kind of the beneficiary of that. I wonder how that, workload kind of maybe deters NFL teams from wanting to take a chance on him versus trying to take a guy with less tread on the tires, like maybe a Kenny McIntosh. Then you get Chase Brown from Illinois, another one of those guys, 5'9", 5'10", 200 to 205 pounds, kind of the ideal size. And this guy plays with a ton of power. Again, not going to break off a lot of 80-yard runs, but can put his shoulder down and run through a dude. Average 5 yards a carry for Illinois, and that's kind of impressive, doing it in the Power 5 conference in the Big Ten. So saw a lot of power on display. Another one of those workhorse guys. So it depends on how you look at the position. Do I want to lean on a guy who has been trusted with a heavy role at the college level, or am I looking for more tread on the tires? Depends on your taste, but I do think Chase Brown becomes an interesting day 3 prospect. DeWayne McBride does a whole lot of things right at UAB. Another power back, does have some decent speed. I'm really excited to see what his combine numbers come in at, because those are the things I think that ultimately move his stock the most, because despite how good the tape looks at UAB, he did it at UAB. So that's going to be a natural knock against his game and his draft stock. So I think he also brings pretty solid pass catching ability, so maybe that buoys his stock up a little bit. But despite all the success he had at college, it was at UAB, so that will work against him, but could be one of those small school guys that makes a natural leap at the NFL level and surprises some people. Again, this is a running back class that's really, really deep. There's going to be some day 3 guys that really stick out right away as rookies. And then closing this video out, Deuce Vaughn. He's going to get those Darren Sproul comps because he's 5'8", he's small, he's light, he's thin, but also a great pass catcher. And this dude is shifty in the open field. If you watch any K-State game this year, you saw a ton of Deuce Vaughn, and you saw a ton of dudes hitting the deck when trying to bring him down. So I do think there is a role for him at the NFL level. He's probably, you think about it from an NFL and a committee standpoint, he's probably the number 2, maybe even just the number 3 guy in a committee. Kind of like, you look at the Eagles, it's like, Miles Sanders is the guy, then you have Gainwell and Boston Scott, and Scott to me is kind of that third, or depending on the week, maybe it's Gainwell is that third guy. Maybe Vaughn right away is like number 3 dude in a committee, but when you're trailing, his pass catching ability kind of makes him a guy who you can get on the field and you can gravitate towards having him play, just because he is basically another slot wide receiver in a lot of ways, because he is so good as an underneath route runner when he has soft hands. So it really is. He's more than a lot of other a lot of the guys on this list in specific. I think McIntosh can catch it at an okay clip, or a pretty good clip. Rodriguez, decent pass catcher. McBride showed some of that at UAB, but Deuce Vaughn, of anybody on this list, is the best pass catcher of these honorable mentions. So, depending on the team, depending on the role, I think there is some way for him to see the field pretty soon in his NFL career. But that's going to do it for my honorable mentions. That's going to do it for my updated running back rankings. Tell me what you think about this group. I think there's a ton of talent, and because of that, you're going to have that continuing conversation. How early is too early to draft one versus waiting till late day 2 and getting a Zach Evans, or waiting till day 3 and taking a shot on a Kenny McIntosh. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. How early do these guys go? Who's your favorite day 3 sleeper? Let me hear your thoughts about this running back group down below in the comments section. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.